Good morning, I'm Antonio Sturiale. I work in space since 25 years. Today I'm in Thales Alenia Space and follow space projects from management point of view. We will spend the next 20 minutes to go inside risk management activities by an operative point of view. In particular, we will focus on one of the aspects. In these lectures, we will focus on the assessment of the risks with an attention, with a focusing on the quality assessment of the risk, and we will see why this focus is important. What we say about the process itself as a whole. The process itself, the risk management process is one of the process, is not a separate process from the management of the project, is one of the main part. It is fully integrated in the project management processes. It is based finally on 4 steps. These 4 steps, before to implement them, there is a first, a 0 step, that is the preparation to manage the risk. So there is an initiating phase that is made at company level by the fact that each company provides itself with a dedicated and structured approach to risk management. So this means that the company has a risk management procedure that shall be applied each time a new project starts. But this procedure, this process, is depends from the context, depends from the project, because one of the characteristics of the risk that it shall be contextualized. So same risk in different context will drive to different action or to different results. For this reason, the risk procedure applied by the company is not enough each time we start a new project, because some project could be led by the time to market, other by the performance, other by the cost. So this context shall to be part of the tailoring of the company process at the starting of each project. So the first step is a step that we perform one time at the starting of the project, and is basically mainly related to translate or tailor the company procedure relevant to management of risk to the specific context of the project. Then we have the other steps, the other 4 steps, that are steps that we have, like for the other project management processes, we have to repeat in a cyclic way each phase of the project, or with a certain time frame that is established at the beginning of the project itself. And these 4 steps are the identification of the risk, the assessment of the severity of the risk itself, the planning of the response to these possible events, and then the monitoring and controlling of the risk. This process is well treated by the PMI, that dedicated one knowledge area, the 11th knowledge area to this process. So after the initiation phase, in which we define how to do risk management inside our project, the first step is to identify the risk. So we have at the beginning to identify what are the possible threats and what could be the opportunities for my project. We have not to care about any assessment in this phase. We shall focus just on the identification, because if we go in this phase deeply and try also to assess some risk, or we face the possibility to lose some part of possible event that at the end we will not identify and then they will be problem during the real life of the project. So we focalize in this phase just on the identification. We have to prepare a list as wide as possible without any assessment. The assessment is done in the second step, in which we made a ranking of the different risks. Once we have ordered our list according to this rank, we can focus our attention on the main risks, and we can start to plan how to manage this possible event in order to reduce the probability that this event will occur during project life cycle, or to reduce the impact in case the event occurs. Once we have launched this strategy and launched the action that are needed to manage this event, this possibility that the event will occur, then the last step is to monitor, to control, to look at the action, to see the results of the action, if they give the expected result. And this is the most important part, because at the end we spent money to make some action for some event that is not sure it will occur. So we can, if we spend money for something that will never occur, we lose money. So we have to be careful when we decide to make an action, to monitor it in order to see if the results are what we have expected. Otherwise, we also in this case we have spent money and we will find problem in our project. Let's look at the second step. So the risk analysis. The objective is to assess what is the severity, the real dimension of the risk event with respect to our project. And this is based on the two components of the risk: the probability of occurrence and the severity of the consequences. And we have to do this measuring these two components with respect to dimension of the risk inside the project and of the influence of our project over the company results. What means make a ranking of the risk? Means to list them ordered, starting from the risks that we consider negligible. We are in the area of the uncertainties that have to be managed, but with different tools, like, for example, Monte Carlo analysis, allowing to manage uncertainties inside the project. In this area of the negligible risk, we are in the area of the normal work, of everyday work. We put the risk in what is called the watching list, because they are possible events that, since they are dependent from the context, they could evolve, because the context is evolving along the life cycle of the project. So we put all these negligible, between bracket, risks inside this watching list, and we have just to monitor it during the normal work activities. Then we have to set a threshold. From above this threshold, the risks are not any more negligible for the result of our project. These risks are called tolerable risks. Tolerable compared to the project, because it means that we can manage them. We can manage them. We can put actions on them. For this reason, we say tolerable in terms of manageable at project level. Then we set another threshold, a second threshold, a threshold that limit this manageable risk with some risks that are unmanageable, intolerable with respect to the project. These are risks that are unmanageable because of their dimension or because they are transversal to the organization in which the project is deployable. And for these risks, normally we have no leverages inside the project to manage them. Inside these risks, there are also some risks that are called unknown, some that is completely unexpected. So for this reason cannot be managed at the project level. And these risks that exist have to be managed at another level, that is the company or organization management level. So they have been, when possible, identified and proposed to the management for the acceptance. So with this threshold, we have organized the risk according to a ranking that start from the intolerable risk proposed to the management, focused on the manageable risks that are managed with the contingencies and the leverages inside the project, and then with the last group that is the group of the lower level risks or negligible ones that are to be monitored, just monitored inside the watching list. There are two methodologies, two techniques to assess the importance or to make a ranking of the risk. They are not exclusive, and generally they are applied in a sequence way. The first one is a qualitative approach, in which we rank the risks relevant to some categories that are defined at the beginning of the project. We are not interested in this phase to exactly understand in a deterministic way the percentage of the probability of the occurrence of the risk or the event, or the cost, the exact cost of the consequences if the event occurs. We just want to identify what are the risks in terms of categories: higher risk, middle risk, lower category risks. The second method is the quantitative risk assessment. So the first is qualitative and the second is quantitative. In this case, we now are interested in focusing exactly on probability occurrence percentage and on the monetary exposition if the event occurs. Why we say that they are not exclusive but generally sequential? Because when we do first the qualitative risk analysis, because it's a quick process. It's a quick process of prioritizing the risk, and these make project managers able to concentrate, to focus on the high priority risks, because they have the main influence on the project and they can affect the overall scope of the project itself. So we make this quality assessment because it's quick. It's also cheap because it can be done with a reduced number of people, with experts, with team people, sometimes with some external resource, but it's quick because there is no wasting of time in calculating by a statistical approach the percentage of occurrence of a risk. It prepares to the quantitative risk assessment that we have to do when we have focused the main risks, because at that time we want to know exactly what are the percentage of occurrences and what could be the impact if the event occur.